full time here at Bramall Lane, and Sheffield United have suffered another heavy defeat to Brighton, this time in the Premier League. I was here 3 weeks ago or so for Brighton's FA Cup victory, 5-2 that day, and I reflected on that game thinking that there were periods where Sheffield United were very competitive in it, and that there was a chance that they could maybe, make it competitive towards the end of the season in the Premier League. It's always going to be difficult for them to stay up with the amount of points that they had, but coming into this game, they obviously won 3-1 at Luton last week and looked very good in terms of the performance. So there was something to build on, and they were just capitulated again. 64 goals conceded in the league so far this season. No team has conceded that many at this stage, and that is just one of the ominous stats. But you don't need to look at the stats to realise how ominous it really is for Sheffield United. You just need to look at their performances. It's been such a difficult season for them overall. Today they started fairly well. There was optimism in the air, you could sense, but Brighton are always a tough proposition. They almost go 1-0 down when Simon Adingra, who really made the difference in the end today, 2 goals on his return from the African Cup of Nations, successful tournament in his homeland for him, and he was phenomenal today, as was Kaoru Mitoma. We'll get on to that in a minute, but Adingra nearly unlocked the door for Brighton early on. His cross was almost put into his own net by Ahmed Hodzic, but Wes Foderingham, who really made this game somewhat respectable for Sheffield United, stopped it. Then the sending off, and it's one of the worst challenges I've ever seen. I can't believe the referee Stuart Atwell actually needed VAR to check it, to be honest. It means it's a very, very tough game against a team that keep possession as well as Brighton, play such intensity and so high up the pitch as Brighton. It was always going to make it a very tough game. Moments later, Facundo Buonanotte, who opened the scoring here actually a few weeks ago with an absolute pile driver, just sort of bundled the ball just over the line. Technology gives it 1-0, and Brighton are pretty much there already. You'd sense it was very difficult for Sheffield United to come back from there. Minutes later, it's 2, thanks to Danny Welbeck. Fires home after Wes Foderingham could only parry Mitoma's header into his path. And then there was a moment just before half-time. It was very harsh offside, and very bizarre moment actually. The referee was causing a lot of frustration from the Sheffield United fans from then on. That was made worse when Ben Osborne's goal was cancelled off for offside despite a VAR check and the decision standing. It was a very confusing moment, and then second half there was just no intensity. You could sense that Sheffield United had no belief. The fans were struggling to get behind them. The frustrations with the referee were obvious, and that was really their main focus. And it was very, very tough for Sheffield United to get anywhere near Brighton. 3 goals in the last 15 minutes, sort of on paper maybe looks like the game was closer than it was, but it really wasn't. There was nothing beyond a tame shot from Vinny Souza, and then a sort of half run through from James McAtee to really test Brighton. Adingra and Mitoma were causing problems out wide all afternoon. Mitoma wasn't here for the cup game. That was a game when Evan Ferguson came on in this one, and João Pedro, who's injured. Pedro scored a hat-trick, and I stood here and waxed lyrical about him. Today I'm going to do the same about Adingra and Mitoma, because they really stepped up when Brighton were looking for a different creative force. And I think that's what's really, really impressive about Brighton, is their ability to create in different ways. Around us in the press box, we were debating whether it was a 4 at the back or a 3 at the back for Brighton today. It was all every formation. You could be right at a different point in this game, because Roberto De Zerbi's tactical flexibility is so impressive, and they've just had too much for Sheffield United, and they will have too much for a lot of teams. And Mitoma and Adingra will win a lot of games. It's been a brilliant few weeks for Adingra out of the AFCON. He's come back and just put in a performance like that. Not many people talk about, and I mentioned Pedro in this and Ferguson in this vein in this last video, but Adingra could be another of those that it could be sold in a future window for a huge profit. That'll be what De Zerbi will talk about when we speak to him in the media in a bit downstairs. When he's asked about Adingra, he'll mention the transfer window, he'll mention his value, and he'll mention that he could become a really, really top player, because he's got all the attributes. He's quick, he's decisive, he's energetic, he is intelligent as well. I think that's the most important thing for wingers, is that they have all the attributes of pace and skill, and those things are a bit like a goalkeeper. If a goalkeeper can stop a shot, that's kind of what their job is. The makeup of a winger is to be quick and skillful and unpredictable. What sets apart the wingers and the top wingers from the mediocre ones is decision making and incisiveness, and that's exactly what Simon Adingra showed today. He was absolutely phenomenal, I thought, particularly in that second half as the game got stretched. It felt like Sheffield United lost a lot of belief, and when you consider coming into this game that they had just beaten Luton, and yes, Luton are another team that are down there, and there's been a bit of a gap all season. It's the same 4 teams, with Everton being in there as well, Forest maybe dropping Palace on the edge of it, but the same three or four teams have been in there all season, and it's been difficult for them to climb out. A victory is a victory though, and it really felt like that they had something to say, having been competitive here against West Ham and competitive here in other games under Chris Wilder. He's made a difference to Paul Heckingbottom, but that felt a lot like the Newcastle game I was here to see in September, when it could have been more if Brighton, I'd asked for, Newcastle could have got 10-11 that day. Brighton could have done the same today if they really pushed for it, but there was a spell in that second half when the game just sort of went a little bit flat because Brighton were 2-0 up, the home team were down to 10 men and lacking quality and lacking belief as it was. It was always going to be tough for them to come and walk out with and to get themselves back into the game. Who knows what would have happened if that Ben Osborne goal counted. It's very difficult to sort of comment on that really from my perspective, because I sort of saw it happen and we couldn't decide whether he was offside. He didn't look particularly. We had some screens in the press box that are at height, and you can't really see the tight decisions at that angle that they show on VAR, so I can't really comment on that. But if it was offside, it was offside. Let me know in the comments how whether that was a fair decision or not, because I can't really tell. But who knows what would have happened in the second half if they pulled themselves back into it. They did that in the FA Cup game, actually. They were 2-0 down. It's very similar, and they somehow got themselves back into it and just pulled away again, and that's exactly the same thing. You can tell there's a massive gulf in class, and that's told even more emphatically today. And I think after the Aston Villa game here a few weeks ago, after the Newcastle game, there's been a lot of these heavy defeats for Sheffield United this season. As I say, 64 goals conceded, and it's only February. You can't hope to survive at that rate, and 13 points after this season. There's so many stats that should offer absolutely no hope, and will offer absolutely no hope to the Blades fans here, who were just fuming with the referee all game. I can't believe that Mitoma got any stick for his reaction to that Holgate tackle. As I say, it was absolutely horrendous. This is another day where Brighton have shown why they can be a top side. They're so tactically flexible. They move the ball so well. They are so difficult to play against. And Chris Wilder said after the Cup game that he was speaking to David Moyes about how difficult he felt that this game was going to be. There was a different set of players on the pitch today. There was no Ferguson from the start. There was no João Pedro, and those two players combined so well in that first game. But the two more players came into the game here in Mitoma and Adingra and made such a difference. This is a very good Brighton side. This is what it feels like to see a team that has a general philosophy and a general identity, everyone working together at the same rate and going on to do great things. This is a team that I can see finishing in the top 7, top 6 this season, and in that race for those positions with the likes of Newcastle, West Ham, Manchester United. But they've got the Europa League to come. They've also had their own injuries as a result of that, and their intensity and everything that Newcastle have struggled with this season, Manchester United have struggled with, Brighton have had that as well, and that's why their consistency's not been great, particularly in some games at home. They actually drew this game back in November 1-1 when Paul Heckingbottom was in charge. That was a hugely shocking result for them after a busy Europa League game. I remember it was a Sunday game. They looked tired, fatigued, and maybe a little bit complacent in that game. They were none of those things today. They were absolutely phenomenal from the moment that Holgate got sent off. They stepped up when they needed to, stepped back when they needed to, and then just killed the game off. It was very, very professional against a team that as I say, I can't see anything but a disastrous end to the season. Now, I've come here a few times and been quite positive about where I feel like Sheffield United in places. The only thing positive I can say about them today was the fact that the fans clapped them off at the end of the game. There was nothing to offer in terms of them possibly staying up. It will be very interesting to see how blunt Chris Wilder is, given how he was after the Aston Villa game. On one hand, it's been a really enjoyable game from a Brighton perspective, but it was a tough watch if you're a Sheffield United fan. Thank you very much for joining me today. Please like, share and subscribe. I'll be back next time with another video. One last quick view of the pitch as the players warmed down. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.